Hello, everyone. Come on in. Hi, hi, hi. Awesome. Per usual, we'll wait just a minute or two for folks to make their way into the webinar. It's fun. Sometimes 5-10 minutes in, people are still joining. So we will give you guys all ample opportunity before we get to the fun part. Get situated. We'll be together for the next hour. Awesome. Okay, things are slowing down. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Maddie Roach. I'm XYPN's Director of Member Services, and I've been hosting this call for, I think, almost 4 years, which is totally wild. I absolutely love hosting this webinar because it's an opportunity for all of you folks who are not yet members to have a chance to hear from our members' perspective, what it's like to do what many of you want to go do and maybe have already started to do, which is building your own RIA. Tonight we're going to cover one of the most important things of any advisor's journey in this experience, and it's building that client base in year one. The awesome members that we have on the call today have been through it. They've made it through year one. They've built totally different firms, working on totally different people, yet they have this in common. They all had to build a client base in year one so they could make it to year two. As usual, we're going to do a couple housekeeping items before we start. It's really, really important, folks, that if you end up joining XYPN, one, awesome. Two, we want to know why you joined. And if this was the call that helped push you over the edge to come on into our network, please let us know. These are opportunities for us to thank the members for the time that they volunteer for calls like this. And it's always super wonderful to know that we were, or one of these members was the reason that you joined the network. So please do let us know on the application if one of these members or both, or this call in particular, was what caused you to join the network. Of course, we want you to ask questions. A lot of you have submitted a number of questions already. We have a whole number of pages of them I'll be working through. We're going to try to cover as many as we can, but please do know that you can ask questions in the question and answer component of Zoom. We're going to be on until the top of the hour, so I do want to try to get as many questions as possible, but do recognize that if you have any questions offline that you want to ask Kristy or Trent, both have volunteered to be willing to speak with you if you need. So whether it's via an email or just drop them a note on social media or something like that, feel free, and we'll get your answer. We'll get your question answered. Next up, of course, we want to plug our next webinar in October. I can't believe it's October already, but next month we're going to be talking about surviving your first year. So a very similar topic, but two different members, two different experiences, two different perspectives. So I do hope you join us back here next first Wednesday of the month for that call. So without further ado, folks, let's get to the fun part, the reason that you're here. Let's hear from our members, our XYPN awesome members, what it took to build a client base in year one. So Kristy, I'm going to start with you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about your firm, where you're located, when you started, who you work with.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristy Runzer. My firm is En Route Financial. I'm here in Philadelphia, but work virtually, so have clients in all sorts of different locations. And I started last March, so I'm about 1.5 years in. So this topic is still relevant for me as I'm continuing to build my client base.
Awesome. Thank you. Trent, how about you?
My name is Trent Porter. I run Priority Financial Partners. I live in Durango, Colorado, have an office here. And then I also have offices in Boulder, Colorado and Denver, Colorado. I work with a very wide array of clients, no specific niche, to the chagrin of XYPN, but kind of work with folks across the board. And I've been doing this for, gosh, almost 6 years now since I started my firm.
Wow, awesome. Okay, so we're going to get two totally different experiences, which will be totally wonderful. Kristy, tell us about your client base currently. Did you come with clients, and how many do you have currently?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention in the intro, I do have a niche. I focus on women business owners, but tend to attract millennial women in general. When I left the firm that I was at before, I had pre-retirees, and so I didn't really take any clients with me. I had a very small portion that did come with me. So I was kind of starting from scratch again.
Yeah. Awesome. And then today, how many clients are you servicing in an ongoing manner?
Today, ongoing, I have around 10 on a monthly ongoing basis. And then I get, the financial planning client who I'll serve, over a period of a couple of months or so.
You're right on par with the average XYPN member. That's awesome, Kristy. Congrats.
Thank you.
Trent, how about you? What's the makeup of your firm currently? And did you transition any clients over when you first started?
No, so I didn't transition any clients over. I was part of a startup, one of the initial robo-advisors, and we sold that firm, and so none of those clients came with me. So I built the firm from the ground up starting about 6 years ago. Right now I have all across the board. So unlike Kristy, it's kind of a whole host all the way from high-income young professionals up to pre-retirees. I started out with a niche of young professionals, and then quickly folks with large piles of money started finding me and asking me to manage them, and it was hard to turn them down. And so I kind of ended up with a hodgepodge of clients, but I like the variety that I've found in that. So that's really kind of where I'm at now.
Awesome. And Trent, tell us about kind of when you first started your firm. What did you have a plan for prospecting? Like, did you have something written out that the next 3 months we're going to look like this and you're going to score 15 clients? How did you start it all?
I didn't. And kind of what's interesting is I've seen both sides of with and without XYPN, because I don't know if XY hadn't started at that point or I had just not found them. I'm pretty sure they had not yet started. And so I really was doing this from scratch. And so I had no game plan and just kind of making it up as I went along. And there was nothing formal in place, no real strategy other than kind of the, if you build it, they will come. And joined XYPN a couple years in, and can tell you that the resources have been phenomenal. That's kind of having those templates and not having to reinvent the wheel is a huge leg up.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Kristy, what was your plan when you started your firm? Did you know who your first 5 clients were going to be, or did you know what the prospecting agenda was going to look like?
I had a rough strategy. It was very much try out a bunch of different things. So I had kind of identified different legs of my marketing strategy. So networking was a big one for me. Education, things like webinars or in-person speaking engagements. I was hosting events for a while there. And then I wanted to do the whole online content marketing. So I was blogging, I had my email newsletter, and it was a great learning experience, but now I've learned what works and what doesn't work. So I've been able to weed out and focus more on the things that actually are producing me results.
Isn't that the best? To be able to look back over a year and say, okay, let's keep this and let's lose this.
Yep.
It's a learning curve for all entrepreneurs, and that's awesome to hear. So Kristy, who were your first clients? Who was your first client?
Yeah, my first clients, I guess, were through networking, and I had started networking a little bit before launching my firm. So that definitely helped me acquire clients a little bit faster. But it was just people that I met. I joined, since I was focusing on the niche of women business owners, I joined all of the women business owner organizations here in Philly. And those were the organizations where I ultimately met my first clients.
Wonderful. We do know from data that it's the networking that creates really that first group. Trent, was that your experience?
Yeah, my very first client was a friend from graduate school. CPA, so we were a paying client, but yeah, that was somebody that I already had known, so it was kind of an easy transition.
Yeah, awesome. And then Kristy, after that, what did you begin doing to market or prospect with the women that you had started working with? Now you had a couple. What was the next step in building that process?
Yeah, so it was continuing to build those relationships. So I would do a lot of coffee dates. If I met someone at an event, I would ask them to coffee and just learn about them, ask them questions. I started getting a lot of referrals because I would work on being super clear with who I was looking for, what I was helping them with. And so that made it a lot easier for people to refer me because they had a clear picture of who would be a client for me. And then I started going into, getting in front of people for the educational events, posting on social media. So it was kind of a progression of kind of the one-to-one to starting to put my message out to either small intimate groups in person or to a broader audience on social media.
Awesome. Trent, after the first year, how many clients were you able to take on?
So after my first year, I was working with ongoing clients on a retainer basis, which is how I was working with them at the time. That's since changed. But I would say it was just about 10 to 12. It was only about a dozen. I was adding about one client per month there for that first year on an ongoing basis, and also doing some kind of hourly fixed work for a little bit as well. And so that was kind of on top of those ongoing.
Great. Very similar experiences in that regard. Any idea, Trent, what your conversion rate was from, or maybe before I ask that question, did you have a prospect list that you were building and were you sending out? How were you fostering those leads?
Yeah. So one big piece of advice that I would throw in here is get a great CRM and know how to use it. When I first started out, I was trying to kind of bootstrap and do it as cheaply as I could, and was just keeping track in Outlook. And so trying to track all of those conversions as I go along, it's just like, oh my God, so hard to convert over once I switched to a CRM. But yeah, so I did have a process though of when somebody reached out or I made those contacts, making notes of what that looked like, and then having a scheduled follow-up of, different touch points. I think that's really important.
Totally. Kristy, how did you foster your pipeline? Did they get onto an email list?
Yeah, I did have an email list, but that wasn't necessarily the tool that converted for me. It was more of cultivating those one-to-one relationships. And I'm learning the CRM lesson now because I have a Google spreadsheet with all of my different contacts. And then I use a project management software called Trello, where I have a tab labeled prospects and I have different parts of their journey. So, discovery call scheduled, follow up. And so that's kind of where I really work with my, hot leads and people I'm actively following up with. And then my more general contacts are living in a spreadsheet right now, but definitely have outgrown that and looking to create more of a system around that.
Totally. Kristy, let's ask you this. What was your fee structure like when you presented it to that first client? And has it changed much since?
Yeah, because a lot of my initial clients, I was working with more on a project or hourly basis. I probably had about 5 reoccurring clients in my first year, and now I'm at 10. But now I'm really starting to, instead of maybe offering an hour here, an hour there, offering the full comprehensive financial plan for a higher fee, and then from there converting them into the monthly subscription model by offering the ongoing services. So I'm starting to streamline that and cutting out those lower hourly offerings to focus on having a higher revenue per client.
Awesome. Yes. Another learning curve. Trent, what about you? What was your fee structure when you presented it to that first client, and how quickly did it change?
Yeah, so very first client was a retainer of $125 per month. Yeah, and that has changed many times and evolved into all sorts of things. And actually, I've done an XYPN member spotlight that I think is floating around there somewhere that you can pull down, that's kind of gone through my evolution of fee structure, but quickly realized that the numbers just don't add up in terms of the salary I wanted to be making and the income that I wanted to be making at that rate, the amount of work that you're going to have to do. So that's evolved currently to where we charge $479 per month for 6 months for an upfront plan, and then switch to assets under management. That's a tiered rate starting at 1.95%, going down to 0.7%, depending on how much investments we're managing.
Beautiful. Is that $125 client still at $125?
No, they are not.
Tell me about that transition. How have you discussed fee changes with your clients, and how have you lost any because of that conversation?
Yeah, so that conversation, it depends on the client. What I really found with the retainer model at some of those lower rates were with the younger professionals. And like I said, I started out, that's who I wanted to work with. And what I found is they didn't stick around more than a year or two. We kind of got everything done that needed to be done. And they would say, and I would tell them, hey, there's not a lot of work that needs to be done this month. And so they would kind of go their own ways. So they kind of left by attrition on those clients. There were some clients that were done on an assets under management basis and some of those higher rates. You just had to have those honest conversations of, hey, this is what we're doing. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give myself if I was looking back or people starting in this position is know what you're worth. It was kind of just like always like cringing, like, I charge $250 an hour or whatever it is. It's kind of always this thing. And I'm always amazed whenever I increase my fees, how it's just not an issue. How people are like, okay, it's like, wow, I could have charged these people double what I did, and I didn't. And so, kind of my rule is whatever you feel comfortable with charging, probably double it. And that's about the neighborhood that you should be in.
Totally. Kristy, you talked a lot about how networking paid off for you. Tell me about how you identified the places to be. I handle a lot of questions from members about that early on in the stages of like, well, I don't have a niche, so where do I go to get in front of my clients? If networking was the way that you helped build your client base, how did you identify where to go?
Yeah, so I did have a niche. So that's really what drove me to the different groups that I was going to. I was going to women business owner groups. If you don't have a niche, maybe start with something that seems interesting and fun to you, because if you're there having fun, people are going to be attracted to you and they're going to want to talk to you. And it was definitely a grind over that first year or so of going to a lot of events. But now that I've done that and put that time in, I have the network, I have the relationships, and I can just focus on continuing to build those in my own time, in my own way. I don't have to go to all the events anymore. It was more of an initial process of meeting everybody, but once you have the contacts, it's just keeping in touch and maintaining the relationship.
Definitely, really good advice. And we do see centers of influence as being one of the main client drivers early on in a member's experience. Trent, talk to us about how you network and how do you promote your firm and just kind of the day-to-day conversations with folks.
Yeah, and it's changed dramatically over time. And I'd say one of the biggest things of getting people in the door has been having a great website. And putting a good face forward there, and leads through both NAPFA and XYPN have been fantastic. I pulled up what the fellow NAPFA members' websites looked like in Colorado, and they looked straight out of 1995. So I think if you have a decent looking website, that was bringing in a lot of leads in and of itself. And the other way that I was getting clients was through networking as well, and just kind of meeting those. And I found those to be longer term. When you kind of meet those folks and kind of develop that relationship, there's a much longer lead out time with centers of influence and actual people that you meet in person versus somebody that reaches out via a website or NAPFA or whatever that might be, because they're looking for that, they're ready to go. And that was kind of a quicker conversion. So that's really what I saw more of in my first few years. And it's amazing how long sometimes those networking, leads are people that you don't even think are actual leads. I, did a seminar, kind of a lunch and learn at a local event 2 years ago. And I just got a call of, hey, you did this a couple of years ago and I've been meaning to reach out and turn into a great client. And so you just don't really know how long sometimes it takes to develop those.
Oh, I love that story. Trent, on that note, do you know what it costs? This was a question that came in just since we've started. Do you know how much it costs to acquire just one of your clients?
Yeah. Zero. I've spent very, very, very little on advertising and marketing. I've kind of experimented with some online ads and more recently in the last few years, but really in the first 3-4 years of my firm, I spent no advertising or marketing dollars. And was always, it always was something I intended to do, but had enough people coming in the door that, kind of careful what you wish for type situation. I wouldn't know how to handle more clients as they came in. So the way I was doing it was, well, I was really fortunate not to have to spend any on advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristy, how about you?
Nothing on advertising. I mean, just networking, membership fees and things along those lines, but that was pretty minimal. The biggest investment for me was time.
Mm-hmm. And you got a lot of it in the first year.
Exactly. More time than money in the first year, that's for sure.
Awesome. Let's ask a question that a caller asked just now. What's the biggest pain point for you? And let's get a little bit more narrow. What was the biggest pain point for you in year one, Kristy?
I think marketing, like the topic of the night, getting clients and knowing how to spend your time, working on your messaging, communicating with people in a way that's going to inspire them to want to work with you. It's just a lot of trial and error, and that can be painful because you want it to work right away, but keep pushing through and you'll figure it out. It'll all work itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. Trent, how about you? What was your biggest pain point in year one?
Yeah, I think it was just figuring out where I wanted to go. There's a quote from Alice in Wonderland that I love that I use for clients. And it's, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And so I was just trying to figure out what I should do. And it's like, oh, I need a niche because people tell me I need a niche and I should do this because I should do this, instead of kind of forward looking of not just for the first year, looking forward to 5 years down the road and say, what kind of practice do I want to have? And once I kind of, that light bulb went off around like year 2 or 3, things really started to explode. And I think that just instead of just looking short term, look long term, measure in years and decades, not just kind of the few months ahead of you.
That is great advice, Trent. Really, really good advice. Kristy, talk to us about the CFP designation. Do you have it? Have you found it to be valuable? If not, are you in the midst of it? Talk to us about CFP.
Yeah, I got my CFP when I was at the firm that I was at before joining XY and starting my RIA. And it's been good. It's been helpful. I don't think a ton of clients necessarily know what it is or are looking for it. I've had some leads come through the CFP board website and have gotten clients that way. So it's definitely helped and added a level of credibility, but also at the same time, I think I could have done the same thing and had the same results if I was in process of getting it as well.
Yeah, awesome. And that may be because you're working with millennials who, I mean, quite honestly, a year before XY existed, I didn't know what a CFP was. So, and I was a millennial then. So Trent, tell us about the CFP. Do you have it? And has it been valuable to you?
Yeah, I do have it. And I think your comments are spot on. Usually when I hear people ask about it, they're older clients and people with kind of larger amounts of money to manage. So I've always had it, so I can't really kind of speak to how much of an advantage it's been. Having spoken with other advisors that don't have the CFP, I think it's pretty huge. And especially with those clients that do ask, I think it's going to be kind of harder to justify why you don't have it. So I would strongly recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, for the education alone, it's worth it. I like this question a lot. Are you using any well, no, I think we've actually already answered it. Are you using any marketing companies, Kristy? Brewer Consulting or paid advertising through LinkedIn or anything?
Nope, just all my own efforts.
Good for you. Trent, how about you?
Yeah, no paid marketing. Like I said, I've experimented a little bit with some online stuff, but really small budgets and at this point spending next to nothing. Yeah.
This is the question I love. And I know from experience that we have a whole lot of introverts in our profession and in our network. How do you handle, and I don't know if you guys would consider yourselves introverts, but if you were an introvert, what would you recommend to be able to build a solid client base? How do introverts do it, Kristy?
I am an introvert, so I can definitely resonate with this question. And I think it's just, for me, it was about learning what my strengths were as an introvert. So things like being a really great listener, that's worked super well for me. So there are a lot of great qualities that comes with introverts and extroverts. It's just kind of knowing yourself and what qualities and strengths you have and really playing to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Trent?
I'm not an introvert, so yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's answer some caller questions. We have a caller asking, what did Kristy find works and didn't work? All of the things she said she started doing, blog, email, newsletter, etc., are all the standard basics. Would be curious to hear what worked best for you, Kristy.
Yeah, because what I found was the social media stuff didn't really work for me that much. It was maybe a great reminder to people that I had connected with that I existed and I was there. But what really worked for me, and I think what works for one person doesn't necessarily always work for the other. I think it's a process of knowing who your clients are and also who you are and what your strengths are and what you're really great at. But for me personally, it was educating people. So doing webinars, hosting small events, and also I do really great connecting with people in one-on-one conversations. So maybe being at a networking event wasn't where I would totally shine, but I would always follow up and ask for a coffee chat and have that one-on-one conversation. And that's where I could really shine and show myself. So for me, it's those one-on-one conversations and building relationships and educating people and giving them a taste of what it is that I do and how I can help them.
Great. Trent mentioned that XY resources were really helpful to him. What resources have been most helpful? He's not familiar with these resources since they're not yet an XY member. When it comes to helping build that client base, whether it be in year one or now, Trent, what would you say was helpful?
Gosh, there's a huge list. I'll kind of start at the top. One is there's coaching available through XYPN. So Arlene Moss, I've been working with, who's a fantastic business coach and kind of helps guide through all of these things and keeps me accountable to be like, hey, did you write that blog? Did you do this, and that? And that's been awesome. There's media requests, which is fantastic. And what that means is members of the media will reach out to XYPN and say, hey, we're writing this piece on X whatever, and they blast that out to the members, and we can reply and say, hey, this is my idea, or this is what I think about that. And that's resulted in me having my name in Wall Street Journal, in CNN, NBC. I've guest co-hosted on Sirius XM radio, and there's just all of these great opportunities through that, and that credibility building with clients is worth its weight in gold. That's been fantastic. And I think the community in XY is really what shines. And so there's online forums where you can just go out there and say, this is the issue I'm dealing with. And this is, and you get tons of feedback on those things. And there's XYPN has started study groups that I've been part of where I meet virtually with other advisors that are in similar situations to myself. And we can talk about what marketing works, what sales techniques work, and, all the way down the line. And the events, whether it's, conferences or, various workshops or whatever they might be, it's just huge that the resources. I wish I had more time to kind of dive into all of these things because it's pretty incredible.
Well, I do know, Trent, that you have leaned into the membership and have been very active since day one. And that is really how you can achieve the most value from membership. So I'm so glad to hear it's paying off for you. Kristy, you've been with XY really since the beginning. Tell us about how it helped you build your client base.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Trent covered definitely resonates for me as well. The community has been super, super helpful. And in addition, one thing that helped was there were different courses and groups that I could join specific to a topic. I did a video marketing course with XY, and there was an expert and a number of different advisors who were all learning about doing video and incorporating that into their marketing. There's a lot of really great tech tools, so you don't have to spend your time doing your research on the different resources that you should be using for different things. They're already kind of there for you, so you don't have to waste a lot of time Googling a bunch of different things. They just really kind of say, hey, here's all these amazing resources, and you can just start diving right on in and focusing on the things that are really going to grow your practice. I don't have to spend time finding all the tech tools, I can spend time on prospecting and working with my clients.
Love it. Great to hear. This is a big question. And it changes how strongly you need to absorb those first few clients, and that is income replacement. Obviously, you've left jobs to do this. Any part-time work, Kristy, or how did you handle the income replacement issue on your end?
Yeah, that was challenging, definitely. I won't sugarcoat that. I definitely leaned on credit cards a bit because I wanted to focus on my firm full time. I could have gotten a side gig, but I decided I'd rather, take on a little bit of credit card debt and pay it off later. And that ended up working for me. I also had some savings set aside as well. So I probably put in maybe about $10,000 in savings personally, and then had a little credit card debt to float me along as well. That might not work for everybody. Maybe getting a side gig or having some income, or if you have a partner or a spouse who can float for 6 months or however long, there's options for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Trent, how about you?
Yeah, so I remember clearly a long time ago going to my first NAPA conference, and one of the NAPA advisors there was like, what does it take? What do you have to do to get into this business and make it work? And he said, you need 3 years and a working spouse. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't have either. So that was pretty brutal. But yeah, it's super important. So kind of having your finances in shape to the point that you can kind of sustain that growth curve, because it might not be 3 years, but it's going to be a solid year before you have, real profit coming in that you can sustain yourself on. So either having a supplemental income source or having, money saved, set aside. I was fortunate enough in that the startup that I left, helped start, I had some ownership in, and we sold that company. So I was able to use that as a cushion, and having that breathing room was immensely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I liked this question when it was submitted. Trent, you can answer it first. What is the most commonly stated lead generation tactic recommendation which absolutely does not work?
So what I hear that doesn't work, lead generation? I really agree with Kristy on this one, that social media, I've never once had somebody reach out that said, oh, I saw your tweet on this and I want to be your client. I still do those things to some extent, probably not as much as I should, that they're kind of credibility building. When somebody hears your name, they meet you at a networking group, whatever that might be, they plug you into Google and they see you all over kind of doing these different things. That's going to encourage them, kind of reinforce their thought of working out. But in terms of lead generation, no leads have ever come to me by social media.
Great advice. Kristy, how about you?
Yeah, social media, I think, is definitely a big one. For me, it's something that doesn't really work is cold reaching out. It's not really a strategy that aligns also with me and what I'm good at and what I shine at. So that might work for some other advisors, but having a list of cold leads and reaching out that way wasn't something that I really even explored, because it just didn't feel great to me. And if I didn't want to do it, I probably wouldn't get clients that way.
There you go. There you go. Great advice. Kristy, you can take this first. How do you stay persistent in communications with potential clients without crossing over into that pushy or rude side?
Yeah, it's a good question, because part of that was a shift in my mindset, because I had to reframe what follow-up was, that it wasn't necessarily pushy, right? It was, this is someone who's interested in my services. They reached out to me, and I'm doing them a service by continuing to remind them that this is something that they need and they're wanting. So I kind of reframed pushy as me offering them something and giving them something. So that was one thing, is that mindset shift. And then the other thing is just the way that you communicate. It doesn't have to be, as you're following up, like, hey, let's start working together now. It can just be a check-in around, hey, I know you were still thinking about some things, or last time we spoke, the timing wasn't right. how are you doing now? Like, how are you doing on this? It can just be a simple check-in. It doesn't have to be something that feels icky. You can word it in a way where it's a genuine, hey, I've been thinking about you. Hey, I know we left off on this. And sometimes too, it could just be putting a limit or a boundary around your follow-ups, depending. Like sometimes I'll do a, hey, I've reached out a couple times now. This is the last time I'm going to reach out. I'm here for you if you need me.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. That sounds not pushy or rude. Trent, how about you? How do you avoid being pushy and rude?
Yeah. So in the very first, when a potential client or prospects reaches out and we have those conversations, one of the very important conversations I have is I tell them I hate sales. I don't want to be that guy, and that's why I do fee only, and it's not a part of what I do. But the problem is one of the big parts of my job is keeping people from procrastinating and keeping them held accountable. And so a lot of times people will reach out and then just kind of momentum keeps them from renewing the process. So I tell them, hey, I want to clear up or down, thumbs up of whether or not you're going to continue on, or, I'll reach out in a week. And if it's something that's a fit, great. If not, just let me know. And I don't want to be that sales guy. But if you want the accountability and you kind of want to continue on, and that's worked really well for me.
Yeah, great. I love the honesty and transparency that both of you guys have talked about. I think bleeds through your communication and the way that you guys work with your clients. So I'm sure they feel that even just in the first communication with you. We did have a question from someone on the line today about what your current pain points are. And I think that's a fair question to ask given where you both are. Trent, what would you say is your biggest pain point?
Biggest pain point at this point is too much work. And going from being just kind of sole entrepreneur to being a manager and figuring out how to juggle growth and delegating. And I have currently 3 employees that work for me, and kind of figuring out how to do that well on top of how to servicing existing clients and adding new clients and how to juggle it all.
Yeah. Kristy?
Well, I'm still growing my client base, so there's definitely still pain points around getting clients and marketing, but also simultaneously juggling things like streamlining my processes and putting systems in place, kind of knowing how to spend my time in the most efficient way, at that point where I could use some help, but I don't necessarily have the revenue to hire that help. Things along those lines.
Yep. I love that. Those are very common concerns, and I think there's something that both of you and all XYPN advisors kind of have to deal with on any given day is the time management piece to this. I joke sometimes that the number one most requested member benefit is more time in the day. We can't offer that quite yet, but some of the resources Kristy and Trent mentioned earlier help save some of that time. We had a couple questions submitted early on before we started the call about how you time allocated in that first year and how much time you spent on prospecting. Could you break it down for us, Kristy, in terms of percentages, just ballpark? How did you spend your time?
Yeah, so I spent way too much time with the blogging and the social media. I probably spent, 5-ish hours a week doing that with really no results from that. And then I would maybe go to a networking event a week. So there'd be an hour there. Maybe I would be emailing and connecting with people for about half hour a day. And that wasn't every day. So I definitely spent a solid 10 plus hours a week on prospecting efforts, if not more.
Yeah. And that during the first year, that's common. Trent, what would you say your first year looked like?
Gosh, since it's been 5-6 years, I don't know if I could give you any specifics of what that breakdown was. But what I can tell you is probably one of the most valuable things, and something that I did spend a lot of time up front on, was automating and kind of flow charting my processes and documenting those, and kind of the if you build it, they will come mentality of when I have a higher work, kind of demand and more people coming in the door, how do I deal with those? Mm-hmm. Because what I found was it's easy when you have people on a spreadsheet or whatever in the first year, or even in your head, to kind of keep track of where things are at. But when you have 5 times, 10 times, or whatever those numbers might be of prospects and things going on, it becomes very hard to do that. And so I'm pretty uptight of kind of automating, flowcharting, knowing what all those processes are. And one of the great things is I built a lot of that from scratch. Now with XYPN, they have resources that those are already done. And it's like, sometimes I see those and I'm like, oh, if I would have had this years ago, it would have been so much better. But I did do a lot of that in my first year, and I think it was time well spent for sure.
Awesome. Great advice. Trent, this question was for you from a caller tonight. Trent mentioned he transitions clients to AUM model. Does he implement his own models or does he use TPN? You'll have to tell me what TPN is.
Yeah, so I do my own investment management models. So I have a CFP, Derek Lawson, who's also a professor at Kansas State, and he helps do the investment management piece. So I used to do it all myself, but now as I'm kind of working on that managerial piece of delegating tasks, he does a lot of the investment management instead of the opposite being a TAMP or an asset management program where you outsource a lot of that investment management, which is a great option, and XYIS, which is the investment services arm of the TAMP that XY has, is a great piece. If you don't enjoy that part of it, I would strongly recommend looking into that. I love that part, and that's why I've always done it. And so if it's something that's not your strong suit or what you don't want to do, and if I didn't have the client base that I have now and I was starting over again, I would start with XYIS because it frees up the time to prospect. It frees up your time to do other things. And so definitely consider that.
Yeah, great advice. Yes. Kristy, how about you? Do you offer investment management? And if so, how do you handle it?
I've been financial planning only. I'm actually currently in the process of adding investment management. So it's not live yet, but I will be using XYIS because I don't love the process of creating portfolios. So I'm going to outsource that and use a team to help there, as Trent said, so I can really focus on the piece that I love, which is the financial planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think is one of the biggest reasons we help members understand is that it's the time aspect of this, is that the last thing you're going to want to do when you've got a list of prospects is hang on the hold button with TD Ameritrade. But Trent, as you mentioned, if it is your bread and butter, and so many of our folks come in with strong investment management backgrounds, that is a huge value add that they offer. I am wondering about what kind of tech stack you have. We had a couple callers ask about this. I don't want to get too deep into it because it's not totally on topic. But specifically, what financial planning software are you using, and how did you come up with how to kind of use that planning process within it? Kristy?
I use XY's financial planning software, Right Capital, and I keep my tech pretty simple. I have a calendar link for scheduling. I use Zoom for client meetings. I have Trello for project management. Definitely looking to maybe add some more as I create more processes and workflows and systems, but Right Capital for financial planning.
Yeah, awesome. Trent, how about you?
Yeah, same for me. So I've been through the whole line of, Money Guide Pro, eMoney, which we used pretty extensively for some period of time. And then just over the last 2 years, I've switched over to Right Capital. For the last year, we've been using it exclusively. And that's a free software through XY, which is incredible. It's super, super powerful tool and user-friendly. I can't say enough about Right Capital. And then I use a CRM called Solve 360, which is not unique to financial planners, but Maddie has used it many a times. And that's worked well for me. And then I rebow for investment management, which is through TD Ameritrade and TD Ameritrade. And that's something that I haven't mentioned. I think kind of just worth noting on that investment management piece is if that's something that you want to do is manage investments. What happened with me when I was right out of the gate and was not a member of XY is a lot of the custodians out there have, or all of them have minimums. And so, TD Ameritrade won't talk to you unless you have $10 million that you're managing. So I did not yet have that when I was in my first year. And now we've crossed that many years ago. But That's a big hurdle. And XY, if you're a member, you don't have to have those minimums. And you can work with TD Ameritrade, which has been a fantastic platform, and we're still using TD Ameritrade. So something really big to consider.
Awesome. Awesome. Two callers asked about this tonight, and I think it's probably because they're looking at your offices. Kristy, did you spend any money in your first year in an office space?
I mostly work at home, but I did get a, kind of dip in, dip out membership with a WeWork, and found that my Wi-Fi here for my Zoom calls was better, and I liked working at home more, so I ended up dropping it. But I did have that for a little bit.
Yeah. Trent, how about you?
Yeah, so I have always had office space in one form or the other. I think that having, especially with local prospects, if you're working all remotely, it doesn't matter. But I think if you're meeting local prospects, having that kind of professional touch, or even looking at in an executive suite, where it's kind of shared space, but you have an office to meet in instead of, for the first couple months, I did coffee shops and quickly realized I'm like, this doesn't give me the confidence that I'm wanting. So, and separating that kind of work home balance is nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us about, I suppose, an experience of someone not buying what you were selling, quite frankly, who they didn't, I guess, what's the main objection you hear, and how do you handle those objections during kind of the sales component of your conversations? Kristy, you can start.
I guess the main objection that I hear, sometimes you don't always hear the objection, came from unqualified prospects, and it was about my fees and just not being able to afford it, or that it was too expensive. And sometimes, that's true, and I'll kind of let it go. Other times I might say that they kind of have to look at it more as an investment, and by putting that money out now, they'll be able to set themselves up and learn the skills that they need for their financial foundation and their long-term financial success. So I've used that objection handler with that objection, but ultimately when I get that, it's usually not really an ideal client.
Yeah. That takes a lot of self-awareness to know that, Kristy. That's awesome. Trent, how about you? How have you dealt with objections? I'm sure you've had to have a couple over these years.
Yeah, plenty. And, I think that it's been less and less over time. One thing that's been really helpful is because, like Kristy, a lot of times it is that fee piece, and when people come in the door and they're like, oh, my brother-in-law that works for Northwestern Mutual will do this for free, kind of that sticker shock can be real. And so it might not be up on our website at the moment, but it's just because we've updated prices, it's not up there at the time. But what's been really helpful is clearly stating our fees on our website. I was reluctant to do that, especially in the beginning where I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to be so scared by this price point. But if people know that they're going to be paying us $479 a month, it's not a surprise on the call. And so I don't waste my time with those people that will be a sticker shock. If they've seen that price already, they're not going to be scared away by the fees. At least they know it's a possibility. And so that's something that the CFP Derek that works with me kind of dragged me kicking and screaming into putting that on our site, but I've been very happy with doing that.
Yeah, awesome. Alan Moore always jokes that his mom and dad were his first clients in his financial planning firm. Trent, you start us off. Have you worked with any family members? And as the caller puts it, how do you think about friends and family as toehold clients? And to the extent this is something you pursued, did you price them differently?
Yeah, I definitely have worked with friends and family. And I think I've never had any problem with it. I think that as long as you clearly set expectations upfront about what that looks like, it's not a problem, and I have done it at totally free or discounted rates or whatever that might be. The problem that I see in doing that is that they're not as apt to take your advice. I don't know if it's because they're not paying for it or whatever it might be, but I found that the more I charge friends and family, there's a direct correlation between how much they listen to what I'm telling them.
Yeah, awesome. Kristy, how about you? Any friends and family?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Trent said, just really outlining what it's going to look like, what it costs, what they're getting. There's a couple friends that I'm still helping out with for free. They're mostly taking the advice, I think. I'm like trying to remember, but I'll probably start charging them maybe more discounted soon, but most friends and family, charge fully. It's just something that I like to do as a way to give back to a few small handful of people.
Yeah, absolutely. A caller just asked, do either of you have thoughts on mid-career folks transitioning to financial planning and how to evolve your natural network's view of you into a financial professional that they would do business with? Interesting. So how do you evolve your networks to view you as a financial planner if you have yet to be one? Kristy, how was that for you?
Yeah, I haven't had that experience personally because I've always, right when I graduated college, started as a financial planner. But I think being a career changer is a really amazing thing. And just starting to talk about it and remind people this is what I'm doing. One thing I did when I was starting out in my new firm with a new niche, and this might not work for everybody, but I offered people maybe a free 30-minute session just to show them what I was about. And those people did end up turning into clients. So you don't have to necessarily offer free services or anything, but just start talking about it, showing people about it. Maybe you're posting about it on your social media or you're emailing people about it, and it'll start to click for them.
Yeah. Trent, what was your experience? Or I think you've probably been in the industry.
Yeah, so I haven't switched careers for a long, long time, but I have seen people that have done it. And really what you can do is leverage that as a strength. And so that can be kind of a built-in niche. If you leave a certain career, everybody's going to know that. They're going to say, well, what are you doing now? And you have the contacts in that industry, leverage that, use that as a conversation point to transition and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And that's a built-in prospecting group.
Yeah, great advice. Kristy, I think this is applicable. How long did you work at your old firm before going at it alone?
I was there for 5 years.
And Trent?
Yeah, so I worked for about 1.5 years with a NAPFA firm before I cut bait and have been doing this since, several years ago.
Awesome. Do you have any advice on how to meet allied professionals such as CPAs, estate attorneys, insurance brokers? How do you evaluate the quality of their work in advance of working with them?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So existing clients is a great kind of way to meet those centers of influence. Say, hey, I like to take a quarterback approach and work with your professionals to make sure everything's done in coordination. And then that's a great way to start that conversation and kind of build those relationships that way.
I love that quarterback approach. Cool. Yeah. Kristy, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's great. I've met those professionals through networking as well, whether it's through a women business owner event or maybe going to an event targeting them. So an event for accountants or for attorneys. I've been thinking about a new strategy. I haven't tried it out yet, but targeting some people locally here in Philly and reaching out on LinkedIn and trying to connect for a coffee or a lunch and having a conversation that way. So I'll let you guys know how that one goes, but it's mostly been either through me meeting people or connections that clients have made for me.
I'm interested in your capacity, Kristy. What do you think is your client capacity as you sit now?
That's a good question. And I haven't really sat down to think about that fully or taken a look at that because I am still at that point where, I have 10 reoccurring clients and, I'll get the financial planning client maybe one a month or whatever that looks like. So my mindset right now is still just acquire. I need to take a page out of Trent's book and cast that vision and think more long-term with it. So my headspace hasn't really been there yet.
Yeah, still building. Trent, how about you? You must have reached capacity at some point because you've had a colleague join you. What was that client capacity and what do you think your capacity is currently?
Yeah, I think really if I would have still stayed solo and not hired a team around me, I think really the most that you can do, depending on the type of advising you're doing, is 40 or 50. I think it becomes really difficult to do any more than that. But with a team I've built around myself, that's exponentially increased that. So I think that we can easily serve 75 to 100 at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a general question, but what would you say, as we're rounding this out, when it comes to how you act in front of prospects, what would you say is the most successful tactic for being effective in that real sales conversation? Kristy?
I'm just kind of myself, acting authentically, being honest, open, transparent, yet still professional. And I found that works great for me. And because I'm not putting on a show, I'm not trying to be someone else. I'm being myself and being open and honest and transparent with them. And I'm also, educating them and guiding them and being a leader for them. Those things have all worked great for me.
Yeah. Oh, love it. Trent, how about you?
Yeah. So I think it's for me, especially in the first few years, was confidence. I think that the biggest mistake you can make is being afraid you're going to make one. And especially in those first few years, and prospects smell that. If you're timid and you're like, maybe I can, I'm going to charge you this much, and we can probably help you with this. That confidence is huge, but not confidence to a point of being out in your suit and cramming business cards down people's throats. It's just really that you know what you're talking about, and I think that's a huge.
Yeah. You both are so filled with great advice. Kristy, we did have someone ask on the call today about how much Trent paid for his website, so I'm going to ask Trent that. But Kristy, how much did you pay for your website?
I actually bartered for it. So I exchanged financial planning services for a website, and it was around like $2,500 worth of services, but I did a good amount of bartering in my first year, or at least first 6 months, for some of those things.
Yeah, that's great. Trent, how about you? Because that is technically a cost, I suppose. How much did you pay in the first year for your website?
In the first year, I did it myself. I would not do that again. The time that the cost benefit analysis there was not great. Just the amount of time that put into it. The most recent time that I redesigned it, actually the other CFP and my partner that works with me, Derek Lawson, his wife is named Ashley Lawson, and she has Ashley Lawson Designs, and I hired her, and she did a fantastic job, and she specializes in advisors, and she actually does a lot of work for Michael Kitces as well. So she's awesome. So if anybody needs one, I'd recommend reaching out to her.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, folks, if you can believe it, we are rounding out the hour. I have one awesome question to ask these folks. And I apologize to anyone who submitted questions that we couldn't get to. I must say I had more questions for this call than I've ever had for any call. Also, we really, really want to know your feedback about these calls. We want to know if they're worth having every month, and if having members answer your questions is helpful to you. So we are going to be dropping a link into the chat for a short survey. Please just take a moment and let us know. Trust us, once you're in the network, we're going to be surveying you a lot about feedback, so you can get used to it now. Also, I do want to plug our next month's webinar about surviving the first year. Kristy and Trent did such a fabulous job talking about a lot of the kind of nuts and bolts of that, just based on this topic of building the client base, which is probably the most important thing to survive in the first year. So please do register for that next month. So Trent, I will end with you. If you had one piece of advice to give callers tonight about taking the leap into starting or continuing to run their RIAs, what would it be?
It's that it's worth it. That first year can be brutal. XY will make it easier, but it's still going to be hard. But 2-3 years into it, it's just amazing. Just kind of the lifestyle that it affords you, the income, the satisfaction, doing financial planning right, and kind of the rewards that come from that, both financially and just more importantly, just helping people, and the flexibility and the lifestyle and everything that goes along with it is phenomenal. So just stick with it.
Your attitude is infectious, my friend. Thank you for that. Kristy, how about you? One piece of advice for callers tonight who are taking the leap or continuing to fight hard with running their RIA.
Yeah, one thing that's been super helpful for me is working on my mindset along the way. There's a lot of that self-doubt that can creep in and those negative thoughts. So really learning how to kind of retrain my brain and work through that and just keep showing up and taking action and in spite of all of that, seeing amazing results start to happen, even already a year and a half in, definitely still growing, but keeping your head in the game and your mindset on the right track has been one of the biggest things that have helped me.
Boy, it has been a total joy to talk to you two. It was just the medicine I needed as I thought I was getting a cold tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you all callers for attending tonight's webinar. As usual, you could get a recording of this if you'd like. Please do reach out to Kristy and Trent if you have any questions. Please let us know on that application if this call was the reason you joined. We want to be able to give Kristy and Trent a big thank you for their time today. I do hope everyone has a safe and wonderful Wednesday night. I hope that I see you roll into the XYPN network when the time is right for you. We recognize it's not going to be tomorrow, probably. Please make sure your pieces are in place, but I look forward to potentially meeting you in the future and you being able to enjoy many, many awesome conversations with folks like Kristy and Trent. Thank you so much. Cheers. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Maddie.
Bye-bye.